Yo guys, what is up? Maxi here with another Diablo 4 video, and today we're talking about the Spiritborn class. Now, I was actually flown out to Blizzard HQ in California to play 2 hours of the Spiritborn, talk to the devs about the decisions behind making the class, ask them a bunch of questions. It was a great time, and today I've got my 2 hours of footage that I've condensed for you. We're going to be talking about the Spiritborn, giving you an overview of how the class works. Then we're going to be talking about my impressions and opinions on it, and also talk about some interesting synergies and builds. I've also got a 1 minute clip where I path through every single skill on the skill tree for the class. So that'll be at the very end of the video if you want to just see every single skill tree or skill node that the class has. I've got that as well. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. So the very first thing that we need to talk about is what the heck is the Spiritborn? Now, the Spiritborn is a apex predator. They reside in the new area that we're going to be traveling to in the expansion. And like the other classes, they have a bunch of different playstyles and abilities. But with the Spiritborn, they're basing their abilities off of 4 ethereal spirits that they can align with. So, for example, on like Sork, you've got fire, lightning, and ice that you can kind of focus on. On the Druid, you've got earth, lightning, nature, werebear, werewolf kind of type deals. With the Spiritborn, there's 4 spirits that you're picking. There's the Jaguar, which is like super fast attack speed. Your attacks hitting tons of times, big fire damage. There's the Gorilla, which is a very physical defense-oriented class that's got lots of resolve, which is a mechanic that reduces the damage you're taking. They also have a bunch of things focusing on block and thorns. Then there's the Centipede. The Centipede is all about poison damage and lifesteal and crowd control. You're going to be slowing enemies, you're going to be draining their life and giving that life to you. And then there's the Eagle, which is lightning damage and super high mobility. The Eagle class, or the Eagle-like alignment, played pretty similar to, in my opinion, to the Falconer in Last Epoch. And you're all about move speed and evasion and just being as fast as possible. Now, when you get to level 15 with this class, you're going to be able to unlock the Spirit Hall. Now, the Spirit Hall is where you are going to align with your spirit. So each spirit that you align with gives you an inherent buff or passive, but it also changes all of your skills to the skill type of the spirit you're aligning with. Now, this is like the real genius behind this class, because when you align with a special spirit, you're going to change all of your skills to that spirit type. So, for example, if we're looking at the skill tree, there's like Jaguar skills and Centipede skills, but if you pick the Gorilla, that becomes a Jaguar Gorilla skill or a Centipede Gorilla skill. And so the big thing that this is solving that's so well done about this class is, if you're familiar with the Druid class, the Druid, you have to use all these different aspects to transform your abilities. If you want Pulverize to be an Earth skill, you have to put on an aspect. If you want Tornado to be a Werewolf skill, you have to put on a unique. And it's really annoying to try to make builds because you have to do all of the synergizing in the aspects. The Spiritborn, it seems like Blizzard learned from this mistake. And now, if you want to make a Centipede skill, a Jaguar skill, you just do it in the Spirit Hall. This opens up tons of build possibilities and combinations where you're able to weave in like Eagle skills to synergize with the Jaguar, or Gorilla skills to synergize with the Centipede without having to do it outside of your skill tree. There's obviously big uniques and benefits and buffs that we're going to talk about later, but the way that you can like build craft with this character, I think, is actually really good and well done. And that's kind of just even the tip of the iceberg with it. Let's take a closer look at that Spirit Hall abilities. So once you're level 15, you unlock the top part of the Spirit Hall. I don't know exactly what level you unlock the bottom part. I'm assuming it's level 30 because we were level 30 in this test and we had both things unlocked. But the top part is where you're going to be getting your like main spirit that you're aligning with. So, for example, with Centipede, you are going to be slowing enemies and reducing their damage whenever using Centipede skills, and all of your skills become Centipede skills. With the Jaguar, every 4th time you deal direct damage to an enemy with a Jaguar skill, you unleash additional slashes, dealing 100% of the damage of the 4 hits, which is really cool. The Gorilla is going to allow you, whenever you cast a Gorilla skill, to deal 100% of your Thorns damage to enemies you hit and grant you a barrier for 10% of your max life up to 40% for 3 seconds. Like, remember that every skill, when you click a Gorilla, is now a Gorilla skill. So every time you hit a skill button, you're getting barrier. There's some really crazy things that you can do with this stuff. And next up, there's the Eagle. Whenever you cast an Eagle skill, you grant 2 Storm Feathers up to a maximum of 8. When you evade, all your Storm Feathers are fired, dealing lightning damage and making targets vulnerable for 3 seconds. So that's kind of like the top part of the Spirit Hall. The bottom part is your Incarnate skill. The different Incarnate skills are not going to change your type of your skills, if that makes sense. So only the top part changes your actual skills. The bottom is just a passive that you pick, and you can pick whatever passive. So you can go like top Jaguar, bottom part Centipede, and they have different benefits. So for example, the Centipede, you heal for 1% of your max life for every nearby enemy you've poisoned in the last 3 seconds, up to plus 5%. The Jaguar, you gain maximum stacks of ferocity by 1, and you gain 1 stack of ferocity whenever you kill an enemy or damage a boss. If you're getting the stack of ferocity, that increases your attack speed, so you can get attack speed on any builds. I don't know if I have a screenshot of the other passives. If you're seeing them right now on screen, that's awesome. I might not have recorded the other ones. But with the Gorilla, it was Resolve, where when you'd cast your skills, you could get Resolve, which would give you DR. And I'm blanking on what the Eagle one was. So now for my impressions of the class, I only got to play the class once again for 2 hours, which when you're going through a new area with a new class, this class, I don't know if I'm just like making this up in my head or if this was actual, but it felt like it had more skills and abilities than any of the classes we've seen. There was a lot going on. It had these sometimes crazy branching passive nodes, but it was a lot to digest. I got to play all of the setups or all the different like styles where we played a Centipede build, I played a Jaguar build, I played a Eagle build, and I played a Gorilla build. All of them played very differently. My favorite personally by far was the Centipede build. I love poison, I love dot damage, and the Centipede felt unbelievably strong. One of the big weird things in Diablo 4 with poison builds, like particularly on Druid, is you get these skills where like you have rabies, which spreads poison, but poison is all about, in Diablo, stacking it as much as you can. You want to stack it quickly, so having an ability that just does 1 click of poison and then it's a cooldown and you can't continuously stack it felt really bad on Druid, and that's why Rogue is doing well with like Andariels and like super fast firing lucky hits to really stack poison. With the Centipede build on Spiritborn, you had poison going everywhere. All of your abilities are poisoning, so it's super easy to constantly be stacking poison. And there was ways for poison proliferation from enemies. If you've ever played Path of Exile, it almost felt like ED Contagion, where you would just be spreading poison, and poison would be following to packs that you weren't even at yet. Like, you would be going across a room to poison enemies, and it just felt really, really good, and all the things that you're poisoning were getting slowed, and you're healing. It felt like, when I was playing this class, the best way to describe it is that they learned from previous classes. They've learned from previous mistakes. Think about what is like one of the biggest frustrations and early annoyances when you're playing a new class or leveling up. Biggest frustration, in my opinion, as a Druid player, is resources. Resources are always a pain in the butt. It sucks having to sit there and like basic attack or invest in everything into just resources to be able to use them. This class, you get a ability on, it's a Centipede ability. It's a defensive one that when you cast it, you get 100% of your resources back. That's it. You just get all of your mana back. It's on a 12-second cooldown at base, and there's plenty of things that allow you to restore your cooldown or get cooldowns back. 12-second cooldown, all of your resources back. Like, that's just, it's insane. So the class had so many just ways that it felt like they've learned from their mistakes. For example, another one, the Gorilla is very focused on Thorns, right? Thorns usually is a very passive build. It's a little bit boring. You just kind of sit there and wait for enemies to hit you. Well, the Gorilla has abilities that directly hit enemies with your Thorns. For example, you can do a punch, and you're doing a punch, and if you're hitting an enemy with the punch, they're taking 500% of your like Thorns damage. There's so many ways that they've like kind of tweaked systems that weren't working well to implement them so that they work better. Thorns builds can become super active builds. There was a way that anytime an enemy was poisoned, they would be taking, every time they're taking a poison tick, would be taking like 75% of your Thorns in addition to your poison damage. So there was just lots of new interesting synergies that I really liked. Another big thing that was really cool is the ultimates. Now, ultimates in Diablo 4, I think, are lacking in a lot of ways. Some of them are really good, really strong, but a lot of times there's ultimates that are just, they take too long to use. Their cooldowns are crazy. They don't do enough to like really be worth when you only have like 6 skill slots. But the ultimates in on the Spiritborn were crazy. For example, the Hunter, which is the Jaguar's ultimate. The Hunter would summon, I think it was like an 8-second duration. If you killed an enemy in the 8 seconds, you had a 15% chance to instantly reset its cooldown of your ultimate, which is this big, massive tiger that would slash everything on screen. And per enemy you kill, you have a 15% chance just to get that cooldown back, and it's on a 45-second cooldown at base. So you add some cooldown, you got a 30-second cooldown on an ability that gives you 100% more damage to injured enemies, and you can just constantly spam it. You just hit it from enemy to enemy. Another big frustration with ultimates is like, for example, with Sork, you would do an ultimate, you do like your big fire explosion pull, and it would just be on one pack. You wouldn't like continue from pack to pack. You'd have to be really careful about how you place it. The Centipede ultimate, which brings out this big centipede that poisons everything, does these poison beams, everything's exploding as soon as you hit the button. If you click it and it is in a room and you move to another room, the centipede follows you. It like jumps through the air and will follow you from room to room, poisoning everything. It's not like, oh, I have to wait for the exact moment where there's like enough enemies and elites on my screen to click this. You'd click it in the room before, run to the next room, and the centipede will just follow you. That was kind of a theme with playing this character, is it just felt like there was so much quality of life and lessons learned that I'm glad that they're learning from. But damn, this class is really powerful. I think it's going to be quite insane. There was an ability that makes you dodge all damage for 2 seconds, and just passively, it gives you dodge chance, like 20% dodge chance, and passively, for each enemy close by to you, you get like 10% crit damage per enemy. There's another one where, like, while you're active, all of your abilities are going to be hitting additional times. And there was another ability, a passive, that after you cast your ultimate for the next, like, few seconds, all of your abilities are free to cast and have 0 cooldown. Like, there's just some really crazy things. I do want to quickly walk you through all of the Keystone Passives. Obviously, Keystone Passives are very build enabling, and the Keystone Passives on this class are pretty cool. So the first one is the Centipede passive, or like poison focused, where your critical strikes cause enemies to burst 100% of the total poisoning damage on them as poison damage to those around them. This is kind of what I was talking about. There's so many things that like poison explosions, poison spreading on this class, that the Centipede just visually was so fun. And the fact that you're going to be able to build a crit chance to proc this is going to be insane. I do remember what the Eagle passive was now. The Eagle passive was per like distance that you move, or while you're moving, you just passively build up crit chance. So for example, you could do Centipede top part and then Eagle bottom part. And as you're moving passively, you could just be building up extra crit chance. And then obviously you could invest into crit chance elsewhere. But like that was a pretty interesting synergy that you could go for. Our next Keystone passive was Prodigy's Tempo, which reads, every third consecutive cast of the same basic skill increases all of your skill ranks by 2 for 5 seconds. So you could just spam your basic attacks and you're getting +2 ranks to all of your skills. And then every third consecutive cast of the same core skill or potency skill reduces all skills' active cooldowns by 10%, increased by 2% for each of their skill ranks. So you're getting +2 ranks out of there. So that's 14% cooldown basically all the time on all of your skills. And then obviously when you're playing this game and you're getting crazy stacks, you can have obviously like +14 stacks on a skill. So lots of cooldown, lots of skill ranks, pretty cool there. The next Keystone passive was Adaptive Stances, which reads, the base spirit of your skill cast grants you, if you're casting Eagle skills, movement speed, Gorilla 30% DR, Jaguar 30% attack speed, Centipede 30% lifesteal. once again, they're not messing around with lifesteal on Centipede. Like, prior to Centipede, we basically had like 3% lifesteal, and that was it. 30% lifesteal is insane. And that's just like one of your sources of lifesteal is just a passive. And then if you cast a skill of a different base spirit, you swap to a new bonus, which increases all of your damage by 30% for 5 seconds. This passive seems like it's going to be really interesting. And lastly, we've got Vital Strikes. This is going to be quite interesting once it gets implemented into the game. So you deal 100% increased damage to vulnerable enemies, but whenever you damage a vulnerable enemy, you remove vulnerable. So after you make an enemy vulnerable, your next direct damage to them heals you, generates vigor, and removes the vulnerable effect. I actually talked to the devs about this one, and apparently it will remove vulnerable for anyone. So if you're playing with like a rogue who like has to hit vulnerable enemies, or like a barb, or like Sork who's making everything vulnerable, you're going to be removing those vulnerables from enemies. So like if you're fighting a world boss, you're just going to be removing vulnerable from them constantly whenever vulnerable gets applied. But you do get 100% increased damage on those hits against vulnerable enemies. So this is going to be a really interesting one, particularly in group play. Like if a Sork is just making everything vulnerable with cold, like you're just going to be dealing way more damage to everything. But also it could have some negative effects. But this one is definitely going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Now, another big pain point that I've had with Diablo 4 classes is build diversity, particularly in the skill trees. Obviously, once this class is more figured out, maybe all the skill trees will look the same, but it genuinely felt like there was a lot of really cool options to take. Another big issue that I've had with Diablo 4 classes is kind of the mandatory skills, where you have to take like 3 skills on Sork that are all defensive skills, and then you fill in the rest. But it's like you always have to take this and this skill. You got to take 3 shouts on Barb, kind of type deal. Obviously, there was some skills here that felt more powerful than others, like the one that gives you like immunity to damage for 2 seconds. But I think the build diversity on this class is going to be really interesting, mainly because the amount of pairings that you can do, not only like full sending into different builds, like full sending Jaguar, where you're going to be just using all Jaguar skills or just Gorilla skills, but also the interclass synergy seemed pretty interesting. The build that I was playing at my very end of my playtest, I was pairing Gorilla with the Centipede, where Gorilla would build up all these thorns and give me survivability, and the Centipede would slow and poison enemies. And as I was saying before, there was an aspect, I said it incorrectly before, the aspect at base was like an enemy that's poisoned takes up to 190% of your thorns damage. And I don't know if you could put that on like a 2-hander or an amulet to get it even more up, but you're just going to be poisoning enemies, and then you're generating thorns. You're going to generate tons of thorns and percentage increases of thorns by casting Gorilla skills, and then you're poisoning everything and having poison proliferations from your Centipede, where everything is getting dotted, but they're taking additional dot like damage from your thorns. And it just kind of seemed really interesting. But you could also go for like crit explosion poison build, where you're pairing the eagle and building up tons of crit chance and increasing your crit and all of your poison spreading and exploding, because you're going to be critting all the times with your poison, and you're incorporating crit with poison and also movement. This class was very fast. It was very flashy. It felt a little bit like Monk from Diablo 3 playing it, in just the kind of like flair and speed that this class had. Obviously, if you're playing Gorilla, it was going to be playing slower. But I think the Eagle is going to be possibly the fastest class that we've seen, just because you like, I got a unique, for example, where you have this like big kind of eagle dash where you'd kind of just teleport across the screen. And there's a unique pair of boots that dropped for me that eagle ability became your evade, and your evade, if you're wearing like triple evade boots, I just boom, eagle, boom, eagle, boom, eagle, and you're flying. And then you could get another ability or aspect where you'd create a storm cloud around you that would pull in enemies and make everything vulnerable, and you could make that ability happen on your eagle evade, where you're just constantly eagle evading, pulling in enemies and making everything vulnerable. There's just some really cool synergies with this class, and I can't wait to play it. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. A little bit of a shorter breakdown, but I also wanted to give you plenty of time to read through all of the abilities and also all of the aspects. So we're going to cut to basically some raw footage of me going through all of the skills. It's fast, so you can pause the video to slow down on any of the skills that you want. I also have all of the aspects, so you can look at all of those and kind of come up with your own builds as well, and also just some raw gameplay. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Peace.